Welcome, everyone. Ana Sofia Pelaez, Miami Freedom Project, and I'm very excited to be here on what is our last show of season 5. We've loved having this time with you all and being able to really talk with the people who are running some amazing programming and campaigns, and really doing such amazing work in our city. And I can't be happier to finish off our first season with the incredible directors, leaders, organizers of Florida Student Power Network. We've been very fortunate that we can partner with you at different times, and you're always part of our coalition spaces and the work that we're doing. And I've always seen the work that you've done with such admiration. I'm so excited to be able to talk to both of you today. So if you could please welcome Puala Muñoz, Executive Director of Florida Student Power Network, and Ceard, who is the Director of Organizing. So the one who's actually keeping everything moving.
Yes.
So thank you and welcome to this show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
Likewise, thank you for having us today.
So can you share with me what is the mission of Florida Student Power Network? What is the work that you're trying to do in this space?
Well, the main thing about our organization is that we definitely want to uplift young and directly impacted young people ages 15 to 25 across the state. We currently operate within 3 main issue programs within our organization: climate justice, education justice, and migrant justice. And the vision of those 3 programs is that we essentially want young people leading the initiatives, leading the campaigns, leading the strategy relative to the work that we're doing within all of those issues. Definitely, we have a lens of uplifting Black and brown young people, queer folks, folks who are working class, and that's the lens that we bring to the organization. Really want to center in on our organization being very youth-led, because that's so important to our organization. For example, myself, I joined the organization when I was a sophomore in college, and I think that speaks to the leadership development as well as the organizing that we're trying to teach our young people to interact with. And our goal is that the youth movement in Florida continues to expand and is essentially youth-led, right, and allows young people to organize and develop the skills to effectively organize.
Amazing. And can you share, Paula, how long have you been with the organization?
So with the organization, so I started also as a youth organizer when I was 19 years old, and I started through the immigrant rights movement, so students working for equal rights. So I actually found Student Power in 2017. I found the organization, and they needed an immigrant justice organizer. So I was between 2 organizations, Flick and Student Power, to essentially build the immigrant rights statewide movement again. It had been a little bit dormant from so many things, from exhaustion to just demoralization, so many things, right? Where a lot of immigrant youth were not getting centered anymore, right, after the deferred action had passed. And so from that, I was actually their first immigrant rights organizer. Then I went over to work at Flick and worked in many different roles through Flick. And then I just started actually a role here with Student Power as the executive director, so it's very full circle. So definitely echo what Michi says around it being a political home and actual pipeline that represents building up youth leadership from when they're younger to be able to lead in these spaces and strategize.
I think it's so interesting that you both identified as having begun as students and then in your early career have stayed within the organization. Can you describe for me a little bit about what that experience is like? As students, what was your own experience of wanting to engage in this in a very meaningful way? What brought you both to decide from the beginning, before you were actually leading the organization, that as students you wanted to take part in this way?
I can definitely speak to that. I shared that I joined the organization as a sophomore in college. And beforehand, I was kind of like learning within the youth movement. I wanted to step in, but I didn't know exactly how to tap in. And I was kind of just interacting with the organization because I wanted the knowledge and kind of like to just be in the space and learn. And that happened right in 2018. I'm Haitian, so I grew up in a family that was very anti-politics, right, given what's currently happening in Haiti and what happened during my childhood in terms of like how to engage with politics and what normally happens when it comes to politics, right? But I guess my experience as a high school student and a freshman in college, I was like, okay, the life that we're currently living, the life that our community isn't living just isn't right, right? And I want to be able to change that. And that's how I entered into the space. I connected with an organizer at the time who was organizing students at Miami-Dade College because I was a Miami-Dade College student. A little bit hesitant to interact with them in the organization, but I just kind of fell in. And the organization definitely gave me the skills to understand organizing. At the beginning, I thought what I was doing was just change making and learning about like how I can make folks' lives better. But through the organization, I was able to gain the political analysis, gain the leadership skills, gain the training in order to understand organizing and understand what it takes to effectively organize. And the way that they did that was that they extended fellowships and opportunities to engage around certain campaigns that definitely fed me and allowed me to connect with other organizers within the space that I looked up to and wanted to do a lot of similar work as many of them were doing. And so through the fellowships, through the membership, through the campaigns, and all the tactics associated with the work that we were doing, I was able to gain a training and end up leading a lot of the initiatives that were within the organization to where I can currently be where I'm at today, the director of organizing at Florida Student Power.
Amazing. And what is different for you, just thinking it through as a student? Because I do feel that because of social media, I wouldn't even say it's a very low barrier to engage. We can all feel like activists and organizers from our phones. But you're talking about a different degree of commitment, a different degree of understanding, a different degree of education. What is that step up for you if you're a student who's just, expressing themselves? I feel like it's almost like you have that immediate cathartic experience that you need, but then it's also can stay with you. It can mean a lot, but then it can mean very little because we're all constantly liking or disliking. Like we're all engaging, we're all organizing ourselves and through social media, but then that's not necessarily going to lead to an organized, lasting change or an organized campaign where you're organizing your community to make an impact or make a change. So what is the difference for you with Florida Student Power Network? How does Florida Student Power direct that energy to real systemic change?
And I'll start, Pau, and then I'll pass it to
Go
you.
ahead.
I think for me, that change was definitely becoming a member, right, of Florida Student Power and deciding to join a movement organizing organization. Like you said, on social media, it's so easy for folks to take a stance. It's so easy for folks to learn and gain knowledge, but you really need a space to kind of funnel energy through and accept a role in our movement. And that was the change for me. In 2018, I decided to join your organization and accept a role and add my piece to the movement, which then allowed me to continue my journey in organizing and make the connections and connect with other folks within our movement, right, to kind of support the campaigns and lead the campaigns that we were doing. So that change, and for any young person that's listening, it's what are you deciding to be your political home, right? Who's feeding you? Who are you connected with, right? That's going to support you along your organizing journey, because you can't do it behind a screen. Movements weren't created behind a screen, right? That could be the way that you first get connected or first get activated, but you really need to act, and you can act through joining a movement organizing organization.
Wonderful. So as students who have stayed in the space and developed through it in your professional capacities and what the work that you're aspiring to do, what is it like from an organization perspective when you're working with a population that's in some way transitory? They're very engaged when they're students. I would ask you two questions. What makes this kind of work possible when you're a student? And what do you see when people start leaving, when they're leaving school, post-high school, post-college, post-grad school, where they're less engaged? What is that transition point for you? How do you keep people engaged?
So I can start and then pass over. So I think the way that where it makes a difference, right, is just having a deep analysis of the change that we're trying to make and understanding that there's different roles to different movement spaces, right? And so, for example, there's a lot of student-led movements that are led by students, but there's an ecosystem of support in different types of way, right? There's resources, there's intergenerational wisdom that also is passed down to be supportive, and so that it's kind of like a lot of the times it kind of seems like when folks see student movement building, it's kind of like, oh, they're doing it on their own, and it's a lot of the times also with our students, they're like, you know, it feels the pressure. So understanding that there's a network of support that allows them to lead without being paternal, right? Like without making the decisions, but actually just activating them to resources that they have and they can access, I think builds not only a deeper connection of experience, but also makes like kind of like opens up the mind to like folks that maybe not aware, like there is a bigger network out here. It's bigger than just like just in a specific college or from like a specific standpoint because you're like, you know, in a club or no, like when you actually open up students into the movement, which is what Michi was mentioning, that is our method in how we organize. We want to make sure that they're part of the table of partners that we're with, that they're able to be part of the coalitions, that they're actually representative of our organization as students in these coalition spaces, right? Like, I think that's how folks become more invested because you're investing in them. And then they see themselves not as like, okay, I'm just doing this for hours, or I'm doing this because I'm a president of my club and then I'm gonna, you know, peace out. They see themselves in a way that it's deeper, or at least that's how I experienced it myself. And also like with the trajectory of other youth that, you know, I've had the honor to like mentor, I think that's what makes the difference, is when they see the bigger picture, that they see the systems that are also not just impacting students, that it's actually like a whole intersystem that's working to oppress folks beyond their status as students, right? Like it's attacking immigrants. There's systems that are impacting so many different ways. And also like how they connect the systems they're fighting in their campuses to like the outside, right? Like it's not just coming from the campuses, it's coming from the government, it's coming from so many different entities. And I think that political education and resource is so important for them to be able to feel connected deeper than just, as like you mentioned, like a transition, right? Like saying there's room for you in the movement even after you leave, because this is bigger than this, right?
And what makes Florida Student Power Network different from what this would look like in another state? How do you feel that Florida Student Power Network is different, or is an expression of who's in Florida and what people care about in Florida?
I think what's coming to mind for me are two things, right? Definitely want to double tap on what Paula said around like our movement ecosystem. We're very deeply connected with organizations across the state who are moving the work for everyday Floridians. And I think I'm very proud of that. And I'm happy that we get to connect our young people to those different spaces because they get to participate within our collective struggle and our collective movement that is currently happening within this state when so much is stacked up against us. And folks across this country can see that. And so that's definitely, something that we offer to folks who join our organization, just participating in our ecosystem and being a part of that collective movement. I think another thing that differentiates us or aligns us with different youth organizations within this country, right, is the fact that we allow folks to learn through us and tap in at every different level. I'm reflecting on my experience when I first joined Florida Student Power. This space could have definitely been very intimidating for me, right? Because there were so many folks who had different levels of knowledge within the space. But I can never remember a time when I felt different, and I was always welcomed. And so this space allows folks at whatever level you are within your organizing journey, within your political analysis, to tap in. And I think that's something beautiful and wonderful when we're in a country where definitely cancel culture can allow you to not interact within different spaces. Not to say that, right, like the way folks think can be a challenge, right? But I do think we allow folks to grow and we allow folks to challenge their thinking in a way that sharpens their political analysis and differentiates us from other spaces within the state, as well as the country, right? Where we know there's so much knowledge on social media to where folks probably when they interact with the organization, they are already politicized in a way. But what about the young people who didn't have an opportunity to be politicized, right? And are still learning their political ethos or are sharpening their political analysis? What about them? Well, we offer that to them to engage with the fundamentals to where we can move them throughout our space and allow them to see themselves within the youth movement.
Yeah, and I would say, like, for example, even like, definitely, like, plus to everything Michi said, which was great. I think also thinking about it, like, right, like being rooted in that transformative justice, right, understanding that no one was born with quote unquote woke, right? Like nobody, like everyone has different traumas, right? Like I know many immigrants that are anti-immigrant and like that they deal with a lot of things through their trauma, and it's like we need to meet folks where they're at, and try to see like where we can find common ground, and that unless it's someone negating the existence of another person, then there's always like a way to be able to like politicize or like help folks like figure out by giving them information, exposing them to different things, right? Obviously, security culture is very important to us as well, right? So we want to make sure that we're mitigating harm, like, you know, making sure that harm is contained and that if things need to be addressed, they need to be addressed. But I would just say that I think one of the things that really we want to think about when we're, you know, just even like engaging with youth is that right now the online to offline is something that is very, very, it's a challenge for us, right? Because a lot of also young people started their journeys through a pandemic. And so even through those moments, it's that really slow, intentional kind of pace that we need to like focus in, and intentionality around how to politicize folks during a post-pandemic world. We can't go back to tactics from 2019. We have to transform to different, you know, ways to do that.
No, I think it's so powerful what you're both describing, because I do think, look, as an organization, I think we all struggle with, you know, I think you can feel very energized by somebody that's being called out, but at the same time, you also feel like it can happen to anyone. Like it can become it can feel very arbitrary. And I love what you're describing, because it's describing safety through understanding, as opposed to something that can be seen as very dogmatic, or somebody trying to be caught out for something that they legitimately haven't encountered before.
Right.
And I think that, you know, what you're describing can lead to a deeper change. So I think it's wonderful. And I think it speaks to being engaged with students who are open. So you have to take that responsibility of how they're being introduced to things, how they're understanding, what resources and education you're bringing to them, which I think is what makes your work so powerful. Something I love that you said is when you started the sentence with, "I'm Haitian," so describing your political imperative, I thought that can go either way. It can either be like, I'm going to be so political because of this experience, or my family just wanted nothing to do with it, which I think both of those experiences in South Florida, we understand, having so many of us having come from situations that were untenable because of politics, or feeling that the political situation just changed your ability to live in the culture you love, speak the language that you love, have your friendships and your neighbors, and I think it pushes you in one direction or the other, but it's never a safe middle. It's never a middle road. It's an extreme. So I think having Florida Student Power Network, that has to be so much a part of the experience of, it's going to define you in a way that without other organizers also having that experience, you just get lost. I don't know. I went to school in New York City in a way that was in a much more political environment, but I don't think I was as politically engaged as I am here now, because that understanding wasn't part of that engagement. So I really appreciate that. You know, if I had a Florida Student Power Network, I think I probably would have started much sooner. Can you tell me a little bit, what campaigns have you done recently in the last year, I would say, that you feel were most, you felt really good about, that you felt like everything that was working the way that you would hope it would, and the way that you were bringing people into the space was effective?
I can definitely uplift the work that we've done within our education justice program. And as many of the viewers might already know or may not know, right? Like, we live in a state that's currently attacking education. And a lot of students feel that, a lot of students know that. And what we've been able to do successfully through our education justice program is educate folks around the current attacks, and then kind of funnel that energy into student formations that are currently happening across the state. And one thing I can uplift around the work that we did around our education justice program are definitely what in the Florida town halls that we were able to do to educate community about what's currently happening in the state and the impacts of legislative session when it comes to education. When we think about HB1, SB 266, right, that has kind of like hit our state, right, within the last 2 to 3 years, a lot of folks, right, didn't know where to start or didn't understand what was happening. But I think in Miami specifically, the way that we brought community in around understanding the attacks and partnering with some awesome folks to kind of bring that education to folks was very powerful. And now, and that was actually the program where a lot of our young people began tapping in when we began talking about, right, what the impacts of legislative session would have within our state. I think currently now within our movement, we're definitely taking a local approach because of the impacts, right, that we've experienced through our past legislation by going to our school boards. And we're right now in the space of kind of like educating folks and also trying to bring folks in around like what that power and what that analysis can look like, right, within the next few years. But definitely education justice in terms of exposing impacts of HB7 and SB 266 through community listening sessions, through community activations with our organizers has been very powerful and kind of been like one of the major things that we've done within the past 2 years.
Yeah, and I mean, I witnessed the organization from when I was at Flick, right? I was the organizing director at Flick previous to this position and role. And one of the things that I was extremely proud with Student Power is the different campaigns that they created around community protection, right? After the previous anti-immigrant bill that came out, SB 1718, and so many attacks, right? Like, I feel like the past 3 legislative sessions have just been like extra, geared to divide us because they're attacking everyone at once, right? Like, in fact, like, DeSantis has made it very clear to say, these are my priorities before to kind of like set us all into emergency mode. And one of the things that after this legislation and so many different things kind of came out around like, abortion bans, the anti-immigrant bills, the attack on LGBTQ communities, Student Power actually launched a campaign called We Keep Us Safe. And it was such, to me, the narrative around that transformative imagination and radical imagination of like, in a moment where everyone was panicking to see like, no, we got each other, right? Like we love each other. To me, that was extremely touching as like a partner of Student Power, and because we're part of the membership of For Immigrant Coalition. So like with that campaign, it kind of encompassed like deep listening sessions. It encompassed door knocking. Locally in Miami, we partnered up together really deeply with the students at the time to start holding accountability around representatives like Representative Eliana Garcia, that was saying some horrible anti-immigrant things and horrible things about our communities. And we held a lot of accountability up to the point that her Twitter got shut down at one point because like the media was also like saying, hey, like you said you didn't support this bill, but clearly your voting says otherwise. And so having students be able to be there, we had our Student Power's organizer, Lady Amador, who is a Cuban immigrant, speak about the rhetoric that Eliana was trying to pose around the Cuban community against immigrants. As an immigrant, she stood proudly in a press conference just saying, this is not the rhetoric that, like, I want my community, like, don't speak for me in this because we are not part of that. And so, like, seeing that, like, youth being involved in a moment of community care and, like, rapid response was just so powerful and so beautiful. And how it's expanded into, like, for example, disaster resiliency. We work a lot with the COC, with Smile Trust. And that's part of, like, that We Keep Us Safe campaign. So it's like the community protection arm. And just seeing students be involved in these spaces is, to me, like, I don't know, to me, like, that was one of the most, like, I don't know, like, I felt awe seeing y'all build those structures up.
I mean, I think you all did incredible work during that time. And I think what's so powerful about what you've just shared in that experience was it's almost confirming a narrative. It's almost like you can feel like you're being hypnotized. It's like, I'm not anti-immigrant, but I'm going to vote for this. This is what this community wants because I'm representing and I'm speaking to them. And it takes somebody to say, I'm part of this community and this doesn't represent me. And I think that's a real power that Florida Student Power Network has because you do have the capacity to reset a narrative because you're not, you're, it's a community that's, they're new voters. They're new, you know, they're new to us, to the spaces in every way that there's nobody that can say who they are or how they're going to fall in line or how they're going to, you know, how they're going to vote, what they're going to feel about it. And it can change. And I think that's what's been so exciting about having a youth-led movement. Everything's off the table. It's all new. Everything's being questioned. And that can be very difficult. But I think there's all the opportunities are in those questions. So I think it's wonderful that, from that student perspective, that you're bringing it to that. What campaigns are you developing looking to the future that you think are going to be where your membership, and can I ask you, is your membership directing which issues that you take on? How are you in conversation with your members and with the people who are participating in Florida Student Power Network?
So it's twofold, right? We do take on a lot of the work that our members bring to us, but we're also, like we shared before, in deep connection, right? And solidarity with like our movement partners, right? To where we understand that we do have to push for certain initiatives, right? Because our communities need it. And I think an example of that is our current work within our migrant justice program. We're currently pushing for temporary protected status for Haitians and Nicaraguans because we understand the support and the impact that it's going to have for Nicaraguan as well as Haitian communities within the migrant justice space. For example, humanitarian parole has allowed more than 138,000 Haitian migrants, right, to enter into the United States. For Nicaragua, they haven't been able to have temporary protected status since 1999, if I'm not mistaken, right? Which means that currently around 500,000 Nicaraguan migrants are undocumented, right? Because they're unable to be protected under temporary protected status. And so we're currently partnering with the Florida Immigrant Coalition, who I do sit on the board for as well, to ensure that we're pushing for temporary protected status for Haitians and Nicaraguans, because we know that currently this is an election year, right? We don't know what's going to happen in November. We're fighting to ensure that we do elect someone who can allow us to continue with the current protections for those communities, right? But we're planning ahead because we do know that if we don't secure it within the next 2 to 3 months, that a lot of folks probably may be undocumented depending on what may happen in November. So that's currently a huge portion of the work that we're currently leading within the Migrant Justice Program. A second campaign that we're currently leading around within our Migrant Justice Program is a lot of our students, a lot of our members have been coming to the organization and ensuring that we support divesting from Israel, right, with what's currently happening in Palestine around the genocide that Israel is currently doing against Palestinian people. Our members and young people across the state deeply care about that, right? And we want to make sure that we're uplifting the work that we're doing and also shouting out all the organizers who are pushing for divestment from Israel across different colleges and universities across the state. And that's currently some work that our organizer, who is Palestinian, is leading and ensuring that they uplift the voices of young people within that state. And we're deeply rooted with other organizations, Palestinian-led organizations, who are also leading that work, and Palestinian organizers who are doing that work as well.
Yeah.
As organizers, as youth organizers, how do you see, not to put you on the spot for a story that's developing and changing every day, but we have all been watching this for the last 2 weeks. You know, I went to the very political school that I went to was Barnard. And when I saw those things break out in Columbia and Barnard, I thought, I mean, this is who they are. Like, this is who's drawn to go to that school. This is who wants to study in that environment. So to see them, you know, I think Edward Said was a hero. Like, I think if you were at school at that time when he was still teaching, that was the class that you wanted to get into. That was the experience that you wanted to have. So to have that information, to have that academic rigor applied to the situation, to have it applied in this capacity and then see it this contradiction for how the administration
Yeah.
was seeing it through has been interesting for me personally. How do you see it as from campus organizing perspective? How the encampments came about, and what you would want that communication with the administration to be if it's going to be productive and it's going to address a real need and a real understanding of a very terrible. There aren't any words for what we're seeing
Yeah.
every day.
Yeah, it's, I think really the root of it, and I think I want to make sure, like, you know, like folks listening and like also see, like we're 100% in support of the students on campus that are taking actions, right? Like it's something that is very integral to our organization, that student-led movements need to have autonomy, right? So like for us, it's not like we were like, okay, you guys have to do it this way. No, like the way that we've been approaching this, especially particularly as it's starting to now engulf Florida, right? Like I think it was a little bit slow to start in Florida because we have a fascist government or like governor, right? And he has put really horrible laws in place in case, you know, protesters. We saw after BLM, the response to that was HB1, right? We've seen something that actually was successful on our end, that one of the education censorship freedom speech bills that they wanted to pass that basically put students protesting for, you know, divestment or ceasefire, we're gonna be seen as terrorist organizations, like things like that actually didn't pass. I think it's definitely created kind of like, how do we even do this without feeling like the gauntlet drop so harshly on our students or even them themselves, right? Like having that fear. And I think it's just been so exciting to see like them being courageously like, you know, there is no graduation for me right now when I see that like schools are getting destroyed, when there's people that are like not getting graduate. Like there's students right now that are literally making the choice to get banned from the universities if it means actually like making noise about something that like right now should be like enraging everybody, right? And I think for us, what we're seeing around like the universities, right, is that the universities have definitely doubled down around again, the punishment. We've seen students getting completely like banned from their campuses. We've dealt with students, international students that are now like facing you know, banning, and it's like, does that mean I'm gonna get now, you know, deported back to my country because now I can't study because my visa is violating, like me being banned from campus is violating my visa, right? Like things like that I'm just like, it really shows the priority of the universities in a moment also that the Santi appointees are part of these boards and are part, like it's all interconnected. And I think that that's something that we want to make the connections with, because it's not something that is like that in Florida we can take lightly, right? Like that this is very systemically like put so that folks are not able to protest on campuses, are not able to, which all the protests have been very peaceful in Florida. Like I was so enraged to see that they were throwing gas canisters at these students that literally were peacefully sitting in a lawn. Like to me that was, again, it just speaks to the moment of Florida. And also DeSantis came out with an announcement 2 days prior, right? Like saying we need to use maximum force. We need like universities, make sure that you're punishing your students. Hearing that from a lead, like that is not normal, right? And like it is a nationwide type of thing, but I just want to make sure that we're also focused on Florida, on how it's being like puppeteered, right? And so the way that we're seeing it is that we believe that the administrations, they are tied to a personal agenda. And so for us, the biggest thing is to make sure that students are, you know, building campaigns that are meeting different demands, that they're strategically thinking about these things, that they're researching like the ties of the monies. And I think that they're really doing that. I think UF was the first in campaign, and their demands were like beautiful. Like they came out very like clear, very strong, saying like, you know, right now we're getting barrier of seeing where you're getting money from. So we need that transparency, right? Like, so like just kind of like making sure that folks are following like kind of like strategy and like campaign building. I think, do I see our state moving forward, or like even our campuses moving towards divestment? I'm not too sure, because I feel like I mentioned, right, it's very puppeteered to be against us, but I do see that it's creating questions around people's morals. Like, it's moving towards people's morale. Like, what are we protecting if we're criminalizing our students on campuses for saying and speaking out about what they believe in, right? Like, when there's a genocide and there's like deaths happening across the world, and for students, it makes sense for students to care about these things. It makes sense for the world to care about these things. And so I think that that's part of the way that, like, we want to make sure that that consciousness is protected and it's uplifted, because they're not doing anything wrong by pushing for a ceasefire, for pushing for humanity, right? Like, it's like a human, like, yeah, it's just like a human ask that they're really behind, and it's humanity that they're behind. And so it's just, yeah, it's just really, I think if anything, it's just making consciousness like spread. Like, why are these kids getting arrested? Why are they getting banned from their campuses? Why are they getting criminalized, right? Like, and I think that that's more for us to like really work around to make sure that they're protected. But we're still gonna push, like, regardless of like the odds against us. We're still gonna support students and support them in their campaigns. And you know, who knows? Maybe like administrations will start moving towards where they need to. But so far they've been pretty ruthless.
No, and I do think, to what you're describing, and it's something I think we talk about in Florida so often in the last few years, it's always the chilling effect. It's what laws are in the books, what has actually passed that's made, organizing, exercise of speech, engagement, conversation, that we all need to have. This is something worth having. If there's something worth going to war over, there's something worth discussing. That's just, it should never be above reproach. It should never be above discussion. It should never be above a very rigorous understanding of reasons for, against, movement. It all has to be part of exercise of democracy and speech and constant engagement. And that's something that I think should be part of the educational process. But in Florida, we don't know. We don't know what the laws are. We know what the laws are, but we don't know exactly how they would be implemented. So I think something that could be, we would think of a standard exercise of free speech in another state could be used against student protesters in a way that, we're not going to necessarily see the engagement we're seeing in other states.
Right.
And this is, I think, the first big test of that, how people can engage on this issue given what laws are in place. And I think it's, again, so important to the work that you're doing. How do you feel that Florida is students are directed towards a different engagement? Because I would think migrant rights are not going to be as relevant in other states as they are in Florida. It's a very lived experience here in Florida. How do you feel that kind of directs the energy to what your continuous programming is?
And I think our migrant justice program is, once again, something that differentiates our organization from a lot of organizations across the country, right, across the state, because we do develop that. We have this container and this space for immigrant youth, right, and folks who support immigrant youth and immigrant justice to interact and support and lead very impactful campaigns. And I think, like we shared before, another reason for that is because of the movement ecosystem in which we exist in. We understand that it's so important, even though we do know the immigrant justice movement, the immigrant justice youth movement is severely underfunded, that we create that space, we cultivate it, and we allow it to exist and continue despite the odds that we currently have. I think as we're tying the genocide currently happening in Palestine to migrant justice, right? That was a decision that we made as an organization because we deeply understood that immigrant justice is directly tied to the genocides that are currently happening in the world, right? What's happening in Palestine, what's happening in Sudan, what's happening in Congo, what's happening in Haiti, all of it is interconnected when we look at the roots of migration. And when we think of Florida, right, which has one of the states that has the highest amount of immigrants in this country, right? We know that we couldn't be an organization, or we couldn't have been doing our due diligence to the youth movement without cultivating that space and allowing it to exist. And I think that's really powerful. In terms of what we have to fight, right? SB 17, 16, 17, 17, 18.
17, 18.
SB 17, 18, I think panicked and like was a very divisive bill, right? Because it was attacking so many different groups, right, within one package, right? But I think as we kind of fought against that and saw how our communities were responding to that, we came out of it stronger and aligned, I think, within the immigrant rights movement. And when it comes to immigrant youth, creating containers where they can directly tap in and see where they have a role, and also defining what our roles are within the space, right? So how are we addressing international affairs? How are we actively working towards a pathway to citizenship for migrant youths in directly impacted communities? How are we providing college resources to students, right, who are migrant youth, who may be undocumented, or who may not have the access to receive funding for their education, right? I think are like the buckets that we identified that impacts migrant young people. And when young people see that, they come to us, right, to move within that space, and they create greater alignment and can tap into that movement ecosystem that we're a part of.
How many students in your network do you feel are directly impacted by, and I mean direct,
Yeah.
like they're potentially directly impacted by the issues that you're working on? I mean, they're all in the education justice, they're all students.
Yes.
That one's easy. But I mean, I mean, how many are
Yeah.
coming from a first generation immigrant experience, or having or in a mixed status family, or their own statuses?
So I would say, well, we had this, which actually I came from this network, like Florida Immigrant Youth Network, right? That kind of like Florida Student Power started supporting. And so we have a network there of a lot of documented students, but now we're getting the waves of undocumented students. And so we have, different folks across, right, across the state that have come to us around questions around immigration support, or even when we're working with the Immigrant Coalition, the Florida Immigrant Coalition, like, we're deferred. And so I would say, like, in our network, there's a lot of folks that have mixed status, I would say, at least, whether it's DACA, TPS, undocumented, right? Like, we have a lot of non-citizen students that are very passionate around supporting, like, the immigrant narrative, or children of immigrants that are, but for directly impacted, I would say we have quite a bit, particularly in South Florida, and Orlando as well. And then when it comes to climate justice, the way that our framework works is that it's tied to the communities like that get impacted by climate change, right? So it's a lot of folks that get impacted during the hurricanes, for example, low-income communities, folks that are dealing with issues around proper protections for housing. So, like, a lot of our climate work is around disaster resiliency when it comes to climate, because a lot of our students are impacted by those things when disasters are happening in Florida. So I would say that that's the reason, kind of like, why we like have shaped their campaigns in the way that they were, right? Like, so it's like, it's not general climate, it's specifically, we do disaster resiliency, we do support with energy work, because that's tied to our students in Tampa, for example. For immigrant rights, right now there's, I think statistically, I think it's 300,000 plus students across the nation right now. Like, and you know that those numbers are hard to always get perfect, but that right now are experiencing graduating high school without a license, for example, because there's no more DACA, right? Like, deferred action is not a thing for youth anymore. It's now, a lot of those youth are now adults or older. Yeah. And so that, for example, us going back into those things that we're like, okay, now we have to start doing again, like in-state tuition conversations, right? Trainings. We need to start like supporting folks like around them being driving without licenses, them having all these risks that, at the time before DACA, there was a lot of support and noise around, right? Like, if someone was undocumented and was a young person, they had a movement, like undocumented, not afraid movement to go into. Right now, there's been a lull, and so like it's up to organizations, not only like Student Power, but like, other immigrant-centered organizations to think about the youth, right? Like the new youth that are coming in. Oh, sorry. And that and those are things like I feel like in the ecosystem we're really thinking about bringing in, right? Like bringing up that fact, because it does come from our students also being part of that 300,000, right? Like that are now like, you know, now we're figuring out parameters on how to have meetings where we're not exposing folks to driving, or like, you know, things like that. So.
No, I think it's wonderful. I do want to make sure we get to our Miami questions.
Yes.
Because you're doing amazing work in Florida, but I also think you're part of our Miami world, and I want to get your take. So we have these questions that we ask everyone. There's no right or wrong answer, but it's just your own lived experience of being in Miami. What is Miami doing right? We like to start positive. I know that we all in the work of trying to make things better, but what is Miami doing right now?
Yes, this is a very
I feel like
difficult
You've
question.
lived longer in Miami. than I
Yes, very difficult question. I think the election of our current mayor, right, was definitely a win. Daniela Levin Cava, that has been great for Miami, and we really do have to do the job of ensuring that we're able to continue having that, right, with this upcoming election that we have. And in the general sense, what Miami is doing right is ensuring that we uplift the different cultures that we have. I think everyone knows that Miami is a culture hub, filled with so many different people, so many different countries, so many different types of folks. And I think that is like one of the things that makes Miami distinct and different, the different communities that we have. And so I'd say, in terms of the political sense, right, like our mayor, that's something that we did right. And like in the broader sense, definitely the communities that we have is something that makes Miami Miami and is a beautiful part of us.
Yeah. I would say, I mean, does it have to be political, or it could be like anything?
No, it could just be.
So I just moved to North Miami 3 years ago. So I used to live in Broward and organize more in Broward, but all my youth organizing was in Miami, basically. And I would say the food, right? I think they're doing right at the food, and the fact that you could find food anywhere at like 3 a.m. Or like, I've been traveling a lot, and I've been getting that culture shock over there where it's like my plane arrives late and then there's nothing open. Yeah. So.
Okay. Good. No, it's good. We have to love where we're at.
Yeah.
What is Miami doing wrong?
And I think there's so many things we can say around this. I think for me, being someone who is of Haitian descent, who is a Haitian migrant, gentrification is something that makes my heart very heavy living in the city of Miami. My grandmother, before she passed away, owned a business in Little Haiti. And my mother is continuing that legacy right now in Little Haiti as a small business owner in the neighborhood. A few years ago, what I currently see of Little Haiti and like what it is currently now definitely makes my heart heavy and sad, because I see gentrification. I see people leaving happening every day and before my eyes, to where I think within the next few years I won't be able to recognize Little Haiti the way that I used to know it when I first arrived in this country back in 2013. Another thing that really makes my heart heavy in Miami is the housing crisis. I think you can't talk about Miami's problems without talking about housing, without talking about affordable housing, and without talking about how folks are getting pushed out of what they know as home. And that also makes my heart heavy. And me also being directly impacted in that sense, right? When it comes to housing, I think everyone is directly impacted right now. Like if you have been a Miami native, like over a certain experience of time. But I really think that we need to do something to address housing, and not even like housing when it comes to affordable housing, but also living conditions. We have a lot of property developers and folks who are managing housing access right in the city who permit unlivable conditions for folks. And because we do have a lot of migrant folks who live in this city, they don't necessarily know how to fight back against their slumlords or against properties that are unlivable, but yet they're having to bear with it because they don't have anywhere to go or they can't afford to go anywhere else. So that is definitely something that Miami is doing wrong.
What is your most nostalgic Miami memory?
Oh, for me, I think when I first got here, I came from Colombia, and I, I came from Colombia when I was very young. I was separated from my mom for a year and a half, and something that my aunt would do when we were younger was to cheer us up because me and my sister were experiencing a lot of the stress of being separated from our parents, and my aunt was our guardian here, and so she would take us to Bayside, and we would go on the little boats, this little Star Island boats, and I don't know. To me, every time I'm near Bayside, like whether now I do it for like activism, like I'll be like flyering about like
Torch of friendship.
yeah, exactly. But every time I walk by, it just brings that like solace, like it brought a little bit of joy in a moment where I was very confused and scared and little, and like it just brings me back to like that moment with my aunt. Yeah.
Lovely. What do you miss that Miami used to have? And I think you've touched upon this already, that, used to be in Little Haiti and you felt like you were in Little Haiti. You felt like you were in a different part of Miami and it was wonderful.
And elements of that still exist, right? Like, I currently live in Liberty City, which isn't too far away from Little Haiti. But I think just the ability to just stroll the streets and just see culture, and you still get that. However, I think the gentrification that's currently happening has definitely like stalled that a little bit. Whereas like I can walk down one street and like feel a sense of community, and then on the other street it's like a party town for tourists, which isn't exactly wrong, but of course like it's pushing folks out. Me being on the younger end, a lot of like what I love about Miami is still here. I think what's missing, or like what I'm feeling, is that I know like within the next 5 to 10 years, if we're continuing at this rate, it won't be here anymore. And I think that's the reality that we're currently living. That like, yes, we see it still here, but in the future, will it still be here? And like,
Yeah.
do I have to begin thinking about even like leaving the city that I call home, right? Because I know like within the next 5 years, things may continue to go downhill. So, yeah, I think that's my reflection on that.
If you were to leave Miami, what would you miss the most?
Oh man, this is making me sad.
Oh God, no. Okay,
Not-
we'll certainly
not the
find a better
traffic.
one.
Not the
Not the
traffic. Oh no,
traffic.
not the traffic.
I think I would just miss a lot of like the cultures. Like, you could go get like Haitian food at every corner. You could get Colombian food at any
yeah.
corner. You could get like, Cuban, Puerto Rican, like so much I feel is like there's so much culture in Miami that I think folks don't realize because we're in Miami that in other states it's not like this. So like even traveling up, I like when I was in Tallahassee, I completely missed Miami local culture.
I'm hoping this is going to be a question that I want you to end in a positive place.
Yeah.
You are organizing, you are working for the things, you're asking difficult questions, you're looking to make students feel safe to engage in these really difficult, impossible issues which we're seeing play out across the country in a very real, visceral way. So you wouldn't be doing this work if you didn't feel like there was some success possible. What do you want Miami to look like in 20 years? Let's
That's
imagine we win.
beautiful.
Like,
Radical
what would it look like in
imagination.
20 years?
Ooh, this is a difficult question because you kind of have to like think forward. But I think it's what we think about when we think about like our broader movement, right? Like, what are we fighting for? And I think what I'm fighting for is a world where like my future children, my future generations can coexist and just can exist and thrive. I think there's definitely a lot of communities in Miami right now who are just surviving. And I really want to see what Miami can look like if all of our communities were thriving, if Haitian folks were thriving, if Cuban folks, if Venezuelan folks, Central Americans were just thriving in this country, right, and weren't just surviving, would be what I'm fighting for and what I want Miami to look like. And I'm always somebody that definitely loves culture. And I think about like the preservation of culture and what that can look like. And I really want within the next 20 years, I guess for us to be inventive and to think about ways that we can preserve that culture and ensure we're respecting um, what folks have added to the Miami space in a way that kind of like continues right throughout the next few years. And so that's what I would want Miami to look like just recognizing the cultures and communities that shaped the city, as well as ensuring that folks who were part of those communities who are still there are thriving and existing. Is what I would want.
Okay. If Miami was a song, this is the first time I'm asking this question. This is extra credit, and then I want to talk about what immediate call to action for your organization. If Miami was a song, what would it be?
What do you think?
I don't know why I keep on thinking about like one suavemente is coming to my head.
The what?
Suavemente.
Suavemente.
You're not wrong.
Yeah, suavemente, because I think that kind of like just brings everybody together, man. Like Haitian folks
Fair,
love it,
fair.
like other communities love it, like we all love it. I know all the words. And then more personally, like when I think about Haitian music, like, and I know like other cultures know it too, Zoukla, Sisel, Mizika Manuni, like which gets the party jumping. So those definitely those two cultural songs I think define Miami.
For me, La Gozadera.
Okay.
Like that's the first thing I mean, it has the word Miami in it, but like just like they mention all the ethnicities, all the different things, all the like beauty and culture that I feel like is encompassed in Miami, and it's just like I don't know, it's Miami makes me happy, makes my heart happy, so like that song does too.
Okay, wonderful. So we're wrapping up. We're definitely pushing time.
Yes.
But I hope everyone will join us. We'll have more information on our Instagram about our next upcoming seasons, and I hope you'll continue to follow us. Thank you for joining us for our last show. Before we leave, what should people know about Florida Student Power Network? The next thing that they can do, the next program that they can become involved in.
Right, so if there are any young people who are watching this right now and who definitely want to join our organizing community and join our student organizers, we do have a Power University program, which is an 8-week intensive immersive organizing program for beginner youth organizers that we opened up applications for. You can follow us at Florida Student Power to see that application, and you can just apply to participate. We're going to have a statewide convening the first week to bring all of our folks together to kind of go through that organizing training and workshops that we have developed for young people. But that's definitely one way for folks to tap in and begin the organizing work that we have for us. And something that is a little bit more immediate, I think I talked about the temporary protected status work and campaigns that we're doing at our organization. This Thursday from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., we're going to be doing a Flood the Lines for TPS for Haitians and Nicaraguans, because when we talk about undocumented Central Americans, when we talk about undocumented young people, like that is a solution that we definitely push to get folks documented right and to ensure that folks have status right within a specific amount of time. So joining us this Thursday, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., which is also on our social media, to kind of support in that work and learn a little bit more about TPS as well and our other Pathway to Citizenship campaigns that we have within our org.
And then more specific to Miami, there is going to be a training in late June we're co-hosting with Engage Miami and PRISM. That is very much a political education school as well. We're trying to create together a pipeline for youth to be able to get empowered and plugged into the movement. So there's going to be a Miami training, and I can definitely give the information to folks
We'll
there.
share that. Thank you both for being here. It was lovely to speak with you and learn more about the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
so
much.
much for having us. And thank you for all the work you do.